Today we learn of an acquaintance in the abyss from reading the diary of Princess Eugenie von der Leyen, my conversations with the poor souls. Get yourself a copy of this book. Link in the show notes. March 31st, 1926. When I went to the church in two ladies came towards me, completely unknown. I said, "Who are you?" They said, "The Forgotten." They were gone. I was sitting in my room. Suddenly I was surrounded by fog with the sun shining in. I said, "If you are poor souls, give me a sign." Then a painting of a horseman dressed in modern clothes, riding a fox, fell near me. He swerved in front of me and disappeared into a bush. A dog that was with me barked, a bit much in one day. April 1st, I was alone in the railway carriage. The nun came. I said, "Can you find me everywhere?" She said, "I'm always with you." I said, "Then how come I don't always see you?" She said, "Because your fluid changes." "What's that?" She said, "You don't understand." I said, "How long will you come to me?" She said, "Until you sing hallelujah." "So the day after tomorrow?" She said, "Yes." I said, "Tell me something about the afterlife." She said, "You wouldn't believe it. Infinity of infinity." Then she began to sing. I couldn't understand anything. I think it was Latin. So we arrived in Munich. On Good Friday, I saw and heard nothing. On Holy Saturday, I only saw two shadows. Easter Sunday was too nice. I will never be able to forget it. At the Vidi Aquam, the nun stood beaming in front of me on the steps of the altar. What a difference that was with the sight of the serpent. Dear God, thank you. I have now made up my mind to endure everything patiently and not to write about it anymore. I'm so afraid of complacency creeping in, but I'll leave that to your judgment. April 24th, my resolution not to write about it again didn't last long. It just doesn't work. I feel unsupported. For more than a fortnight, a man has come to me in a very sad condition. It's bearable. I don't know him. April 27th, he was very restless and crying. April 30th, he came running into my room in daylight with blood on his head and his hands. I said, "How can I help you?" He said, "Give me your hand." I gave it to him with disgust and the certain feeling that I would get bloody too. None of that. They were just very hot. I said, "How can this help you?" He said, "You're cooling." I said, "Who are you?" He said, "You must know me." I said, "I don't know you." He said, "I'm buried in the abyss." I said, "Your soul or your body?" He said, "My shell." "What's your name?" "Aloise." I have no idea who that could be. May 1st, he came again by day. I saw very clearly that his head was completely smashed in. "Why are you so full of blood?" He said, "Because nobody dries it for me." "Should I do that?" He said, "You don't understand my language." I said, "You're talking figuratively. Is blood pain?" He said, "Yes, I am forgotten in the abyss." He went away crying. May 2nd, he held the doorknob as I walked into my room. It's too strange. I'm more frightened by these minor things than by the apparition itself. I said, "Tell me, why do you keep talking about the abyss?" He said, "Because I'm in it." I said, "Is that the name of a punishment?" He said, "No." I said, "Can't you tell me more?" He said, "No." Then he suddenly jumped at me as if he wanted to hurt me. I said, "Be calm. What do you actually want?" He said, "You must know me." But I just don't know him. May 3rd and 4th, he was there a lot without talking. May 5th, it occurred to me that it could be Aloise Z. who was at blank, 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 1879. A great mountaineer, and I think he had an accident on the Todi. Unfortunately, he didn't come today. May 6th, so it really is as I thought. I said, "Are you the unfortunate Mr. Z?" He said, "Yes, you set me free." I said, "How can it help you that I recognize you?" He said, "Then you will give more." I said, "It doesn't make a difference to me. I do what I can. Are your bones still in the abyss?" He said, "Yes." I said, but that won't harm your soul. It's saved. He said, saved, but in the abyss. I am calling to you from the depths. I said, do you still have to atone for so much? He said, my whole life was meaningless. Actually, there's an asterisk that says, sport and tourism are not the goal and meaning of life. Nothing remains but spiritual poverty and emptiness. How few profit from the feasts of the Lord. How detached from the Creator do people live day to day. So he lived for sport and tourism. He said, my whole life was meaningless. How poor I am. Pray with me. That's what I did for a long time. I don't understand it myself. How can I? I'm no longer the scattered self. He became very calm and looked at me gratefully. I said, is it easier for you now? He said, yes. I said, why don't you pray yourself? He said, the soul is faint-hearted when it knows the greatness of God. I said, aren't you allowed to describe it to me? He said, no, but the consuming longing to see him again is our torment. I said, are you with other souls? He said, yes, but we are all isolated. I said, how did you find me? He said, you were on my way. I said, how can I best help you? He said, if you hurt yourself and don't commit a sin. I said, but if you're asking a lot of me. The first is fine. The other I would like, but it's not possible. Unfortunately, I'm still a human being and exposed to so much. He said, the purer you are, the more you can help us. I said, how do you know that? He said, we are painless when close to you. I said, but go to a perfect one. He said, this way is shown to us. I said, from what spheres may you come to me? He said, from the lower ones. And then, no answer. But he stayed there for a long time. May 7th, he came to breakfast, walked back and forth between so-and-so and me. It was almost unbearable not to let anything be noticed. I was finally able to leave, but almost immediately he was with me again. I said, please don't come when I'm among people. He said, I only see you. I said, don't you remember the rooms you were in so often? He said, yes. Now he came up to me and put his hands on my shoulders. He was very unlikable to me in life. Now, even more so. I said, leave me. I don't want you to touch me. He said, now you're clean. I said, did you notice that I was at Holy Communion with you today? He said, that's what attracts me. I prayed with him for a long time. He looked happier. All of this is very reluctantly written. May 9th, AZ was there for a long time. Unfortunately, I was very busy, and he sobbed a lot. I said, why are you so sad today? Aren't you feeling better? He said, I see everything so clearly. I said, what? He said, my lost life. I said, does it still help you to have regrets now? He said, it's too late. I said, did you feel that immediately after death? He said, no. I said, tell me, how is it possible that you can only show yourself as you were in life? He said, by will. May 10th, there's something new about to happen to me, and I'm afraid. May 13th, Z is here, but very restless. I said, when will you finally calm down? He said, you are divided. I said, do you notice that something else is already pressing on me? He said, yes. I said, can't you drive the other one away? He said, no. I said, what is it? He said, give me the last thing you have, and then I'm free. I said, okay, I don't want to think about the other stuff just yet. He was gone. It's not as easy as I promised him. I'll try to eliminate the nagging altogether. I can't satisfy two. I have to admit something. I felt so miserable and so terribly abandoned that I cried like a child. I'm still so unwilling to make sacrifices. May 15th. I said, are you satisfied? He said, yes, peace. I said, is it coming over you? He said, to the radiant light. That day he came to me 3 times, each time a little happier. It was probably goodbye. May 16th, I woke up to a horrible noise. It was a storm in my room. I got up, it was windless outside. Then a big ball rolled through my room, or a misshapen barrel. I can't tell exactly what, I was too scared. Then I suddenly heard myself being called very clearly. I was very confused. Then suddenly everything was quiet and I was able to sleep a little longer. May 17th, it was similar again, but not as bad. In the garden, I saw 2 women coming towards me. Suddenly they were gone. I know I should try to keep these videos short, but as I read this, I have such a disgust for myself. I'm currently on a particular fast, and I was thinking of quitting the fast. And then I read about how these sacrifices help the poor souls and how weak my flesh is that I want to give up this fast so I can endure some earthly pleasures. It's very difficult. Please pray for me. I'll pray for you, but mostly let's offer up these kinds of sufferings and fasts to these poor souls. They need it more than anyone. I'm Dr. Christine Bacon. Thanks for watching this Bacon Bit. And as always, remember to live your life sunny side up.